אשרי האיש אשר ילך בצאת רשעים ובדרך חטאים לימות וחברת לעצים לישב תורת השמחתו ובתורתו יגע יומם ולילה נטו על נחלימים הנשא פרב ביתו עליו ליבול לעולם כל אשר ישע ישגשג ולכן הפתעה.
Today, let's talk about the golden veil and the bride behind the glory before the heavenly wedding. Beloved, in the last teaching we spoke of the sealed room, but today we are not looking at the room itself. Today, we are looking at what surrounds it. The golden veil, the radiant boundary of glory that separates the sacred from the passing away. And we need to move carefully, because the veil is one of those mysteries that can be misunderstood if we see it only with earthly eyes. A veil can look like separation, concealment, silence, and even distance. But in the sacred pattern, the veil is not always distant. The veil can be reverence. The veil can be a protection. The veil can be an honor. The veil can be the sign that what is behind it is holy, guarded, and not to be handled casually. So today, we are not repeating the sealed room, returning to the wilderness preparation on earth, or the chambers of the heart. We are not returning to Isaiah 26 as the main foundation. Today, we are moving to the veil itself. The golden veil shows us how that holy place is guarded, speaks of the glory boundary around that reception, and reveals the radiance that surrounds the chamber. Once the bride has been brought near, she is not exposed to the outer shadow. She is not left uncovered. She is not placed in the king's chamber as something common. She is surrounded by glory, kept in holy radiance, and guarded by the presence of the Almighty. When I say Shekhinah, I am speaking of the dwelling presence of God, the glory presence that abides, covers, fills, and sanctifies the holy place. The golden veil is the boundary of Shekinah light around the bride. It is the glory of God becoming a covering, a boundary, and a holy atmosphere. So the question before us today is this: what does the veil reveal? What does it guard? Why is it golden? Why is the bride veiled before the appointed unveiling? And why do so many ancient witnesses, the sanctuary, the bridal language, the Shavuot pattern, the covered holy things, and the language of Shekinah, all point us toward this same sacred mystery? Let us enter carefully. The first layer we must establish is this: the veil is not absent. The veil is reverence. This is important because many people think that if something is veiled, it means it has been removed. But sacred language teaches us something deeper. When the holy place is veiled, it does not mean God is absent. It means the presence is guarded. When the sacred object is covered, it does not mean it is empty. It means it must not be treated casually. When the bride is veiled, it means her unveiling belongs to the appointed moment. This is why the veil must be understood with reverence. In the sanctuary pattern, the veil did not mean that nothing lay behind it. The veil meant the inner place was holy. It marked the boundary between ordinary access and sacred access. It taught the people that nearness to God's presence has order. The veil said, this place is not common. This presence is real. Approach cannot be careless. So when we speak of the golden veil, we are not speaking of a veil of rejection. We are speaking of a veil of glory. Gold speaks of value, kingship, purification, sacred beauty. A golden veil is not a veil of shame. It is a veil of honor. It says, Vigo, what is behind this veil belongs to the king. It has entered holy nearness and cannot be interpreted by the outer world. This is essential for the mystery of the bride. She is veiled because heaven is honoring her, because glory surrounds her, because her place is sacred. The veil is the protection of nearness. This is why reverence matters. In our time, people often want spiritual things without reverence. They want mysteries without consecration. They want glory without order. They want holy things to be exposed quickly, explained quickly, consumed quickly, and made available to every argument. But the veil teaches another way. The veil teaches patience, holy timing. The veil teaches that what belongs to God need not be rushed into public view. The veil teaches that sacred things are not common things. And the bride understands this. She does not fight the veil. She rests beneath it, and understands that the covering is an honor. She trusts the king who determines the appointed time. So the first mystery of the golden veil is this. The veil does not mean the presence is missing. The veil means the presence is guarded in holiness. Now we can go deeper and talk about the veil as the boundary between outer shadow and inner glory. The golden veil is not only reverence, it is a boundary. It marks the difference between what is outside and what is within. It separates the outer shadow from the inner glory. It separates the atmosphere of confusion from the atmosphere of heaven. It separates the noise of the world from the stillness of the king's chamber. Outside the veil there may be shaking, misunderstanding, accusation, fear, conflict, and shadow. But inside the veil, another order rules. The bride is not governed by the outer world. The king's presence fills the atmosphere. The bride is no longer interpreted by those who stand outside the mystery. This is why the golden veil is so powerful. It does not merely veil the bride. It changes the atmosphere around her. It places her inside a boundary of glory. The golden veil is the boundary where the shadow loses its authority. Now we must also make a careful distinction, because there is a veil in the wilderness and there is a veil in heaven, and they do not belong to the same moment. The wilderness gives us the earthly copy, but heaven holds the fullness. In the wilderness, the veil is connected to preparation, protection, concealment, and separation from the world while the bride is still being formed. That veil belongs to the earthly journey before the transfer. On earth, the bride is veiled for preparation. The veil separates her from the world while she is being formed. But the golden veil we are speaking of today is higher. It belongs to the heavenly place after the bride has already been transferred. It surrounds the sealed room of heaven, where she is received in glory, not still struggling in the wilderness. In heaven, she is not veiled for earthly formation. She is veiled in glory, because she has been received into the king's house. And this is very important. The public revelation of the bride does not happen at the transfer. After the transfer, she is still veiled, but now the veil is no longer the wilderness veil. It is the golden veil of heaven, the glory boundary around the bride, until the appointed public manifestation later, connected to the marriage supper, the public celebration, and the wedding fullness after the earth-side events have unfolded. The shadow may pass outside, but it does not define what is inside. The voices may multiply outside, but they do not govern what is behind the veil. The earth may shake outside, but the king's chamber is not shaken. This is one of the deepest comforts that we must recognize. God not only protects by removing danger, sometimes God protects by surrounding what belongs to him with glory. He creates a boundary that the outer shadow cannot cross. He places his presence around what he has received. He wraps the holy thing in holy light. And this is why the golden veil is not a dark image. It is a radiant boundary. It is protection through glory. It is the Shekhinah presence becoming atmosphere. It is the dwelling glory of God saying, "This that belongs to me." This is also where we must carefully distinguish the stages. Behind the golden veil, she is no longer in that same earthly struggle. She has been received and brought inward. She is now in the atmosphere of heavenly keeping. The wilderness taught her to come out from the noise, guard the oil, and listen to one voice. The golden veil surrounds her with the atmosphere of heaven. The oil is honored, and the one voice fills the chamber. So the veil is not only a separation from darkness, it is an entrance into another order. The golden veil tells us that the bride is no longer standing in the open field of the world. She is not being pulled in every direction. She is not being exposed to every accusation. She is not under the interpretation of the outer shadow. She is inside the boundary of glory. And what God has brought inside that boundary is not lost. It is kept. Let's talk about the veil and the sanctuary witness. Now we need to look at the ancient sanctuary witness. The sanctuary teaches us that sacred space has order. There was an outer area. There was a holy place. There was the most holy place. And the veil marked the boundary of the inner place. The veil was not a decoration. It was not merely fabric. It was a sacred sign that access to God's presence was not casual. The sanctuary language belongs deeply to the shared sacred memory of Israel. The holy place was not treated as common. The inner place was not approached casually. The glory of God was not handled as ordinary. The veil taught reverence. And when we compare this with the bride, we begin to understand that the bride is connected to the inner mystery of dwelling. She is not merely outside the house. She is connected to the place where covenant, presence, and glory meet. This does not mean we are turning the bride into an object. No. We are reading the pattern. Holy things are covered, guarded, and approached in accordance with divine order. The same pattern appears in ancient Ethiopian sacred tradition in the covered tablet, which represents the Ark of the Covenant and is kept with great reverence. The sacred thing is not exposed casually. It is covered, honored, and brought forth in appointed order. This gives us another witness. What is holy is covered. It is not absent. What is guarded is not forgotten. What is veiled is not empty. The covering itself becomes a witness to the presence of sacredness. This is very close to what we are saying about the golden veil. The veil is a sign that what is there is holy. The veil says, do not profane this. Do not rush this. The veil says, do not treat this as common to us. And this helps us understand the bride's hiddenness behind glory. The bride is not being erased, is not being silenced by rejection, is not being covered because heaven is ashamed. She is being guarded, kept in holy order. She belongs to the inner place. That is sanctuary and reverence language, the language of holy access. And we need this language, because without it, people may try to understand everything too quickly. They may want the bride revealed before the appointed time. They may want the mystery explained before the hour. They may demand proof from outside the veil, but the veil answers them quietly. The king determines access, timing, and unveiling, and the bride rests under that order. Now we must look at the veil as a bridal honor. A bride is not veiled because she has no beauty. She is veiled because her unveiling is part of the covenant. The veil does not deny the wedding. The veil announces that the wedding is near. This is why the golden veil carries such tender meaning. The bride is not for every eye in the same way. Her beauty is not common. She is not silent because she has nothing to say. She is silent because the next sound belongs to the appointed order of heaven. The bride does not unveil herself through impatience. She does not tear open the veil because the outside world demands explanation. She does not force recognition. She does not try to prove what heaven already knows. She waits beneath the covering of glory. This is bridal wisdom. The bride trusts the bridegroom, the king's timing, and the order of the house. She knows that what has been covered by God will be revealed by God. And this is where the veil becomes a protection of honor. It protects the bride from premature exposure. It protects the mystery from being handled by the wrong spirit. It protects the sacred moment from being reduced to public argument. It protects the chamber from outside noise. So the golden veil is not only around a place, it is around an appointed moment. It guards the time of unveiling, the honor of the bride, the joy before the wedding. This is why the veil must be golden, because it is a veil of glory. It is the radiance of the king's house around the bride before her appointed presentation. And this is also where we must keep the distinction from the wedding ceremony itself. Now we come to one of the deepest layers, the golden veil as the Shekhinah Radiance. The golden veil is not merely a symbolic curtain. It is the radiance of divine presence around the bride. It is the dwelling glory becoming a boundary. It is Shekinah light covering what has entered the king's nearness. And this language is important because ancient Jewish mystical interpretation preserved a very powerful bridal pattern around Shavuot. In that pattern, the bride is adorned before the appointed union. The companions remain with her. The night before Shavuot becomes a night of preparation, adornment, companionship, and joy. The bride is connected with covenant, Torah, adornment, and the Shekinah presence. We are looking carefully at ancient witnesses and asking what pattern they preserve. And the pattern is beautiful. Shavuot is not only a day of instruction or law as command, it is also remembered with bridal language. It becomes law as a covenant. It becomes law as an adornment. It becomes the living order of God prepared for union. This matters deeply because the bride is not lawlessness, disorder, or rebellion wrapped in spiritual language. The bride carries covenant order, the law written within. She carries the living instruction of God. She carries the presence. She carries the radiance of the king's house. This is where the Shekhinah pattern becomes so meaningful. The Shekhinah does not speak of a distant God. It speaks of the God who dwells, the God who abides, the God who fills the holy place with his presence, and his presence is placed among his people. So when the bride is surrounded by the golden veil, we are not only seeing a covering over beauty, we are seeing the radiance of covenant presence around her. The veil becomes the atmosphere of the king's house. It surrounds the bride as one who carries the mystery of presence, covenant, and holy order. She is covered because the glory around her is sacred. And this is why the golden veil must be understood as more than protection from the outside shadow. It is also the sign that the bride has entered the dwelling place of divine nearness. When the daughter is surrounded by the radiance of the Shekhinah, she is being marked by the atmosphere of heaven. The veil is the light around what God has received, and the radiance around the living covenant mystery. The veil is the glory boundary around the bride before the appointed unveiling. This is why the golden veil feels different from earthly protection. Earthly protection may feel like shelter from danger, but heavenly covering feels like radiance. It is not only keeping the shadow out, it is filling the inner place with glory. The golden veil does not merely say, "Do not enter." It also says, "The presence is here." Now, before we close this part, let us gather some of the ancient witnesses together. The Tanakh gives us the sanctuary veil, the glory filling the holy place, the cloud of presence, the covering over Zion, and the bridal procession of Psalm 45. The Song of Songs gives us the language of the king bringing the beloved into his chambers. The rabbinic and Jewish mystical witnesses preserve bridal language around Shavuot, the adornment of the bride, the companions who remain near her, the sacred preparation of the covenant moment, the Torah, and the Shekinah. The Aramaic and Peshitta atmosphere helps us hear the language of chamber, nearness, invitation, and covenant as something living and intimate, not merely conceptual. The king brings the beloved inward into the place of sacred approach. And the Ethiopian sacred pattern gives us another powerful witness through the covered tabot, the sacred sign connected to the ark and the presence of God, kept in the Holy of Holies and covered with reverence when carried forth. This shows us that what carries holy presence is not exposed casually. It is guarded, veiled, and honored. These witnesses do not all speak in the same way. They do not all use the same vocabulary. They do not all belong to the same tradition or interpretive world. But when we compare them carefully without forcing them, we can see a sacred pattern. Holy presence is covered. Sacred nearness has order. The bride is adorned. The chamber is guarded. The veil is reverence. The glory is not common. The appointed unveiling belongs to God. This is why comparative study is so important. We are not trying to erase the differences between traditions, nor are we trying to force every source to say the same thing. We are noticing how ancient witnesses preserve echoes of the same mystery. In the Zoharic tradition of Tikkun Leil Shavuot, the night of Shavuot is described with bridal language. The bride is adorned, companions remain with her, and the covenant moment is approached as a kind of wedding preparation. This shows that ancient Jewish study preserved a pattern in which Torah, bride, Shekinah, adornment, and holy nearness belong together. So when we speak of the golden veil, we are not inventing an empty image. We are gathering a sacred pattern, a sanctuary pattern, a bridal pattern, a Shavuot pattern, a Shekinah pattern, a covered holiness pattern. Rabbinic and mystical traditions help us see the bride adorned in Shekinah-related Shavuot imagery. The Aramaic and Peshitta atmosphere gives us the chamber of sacred nearness. The Ethiopian witness shows covered holiness, guarded in reverence. And together, these witnesses help us understand that the veil is not an absence, but a holy presence under divine order. It is not darkness, but Shekinah radiance. It is not rejection, but the glory boundary around what God has brought near. The bride behind the veil is not forgotten, but honored and guarded. surrounded by glory and kept in holy order until the appointed moment. And before we close, I want to say something tenderly about the daughter. The golden veil helps us understand why her story is so sacred. As we said before, she is not veiled because she is forgotten. She is veiled because what God has formed in her is holy. The daughter came as an offering before God. A being of heavenly origin entered the place of imperfection, exile, sorrow, and limitation. She left the comfort of the heavenly realm and entered the difficult path of obedience, not for herself alone, but for the purposes of the Almighty. Her path is connected to restoration, is connected to the recovery of what was lost. Her path is connected to the crushing of the serpent's head, the defeat of the hybrid serpent, the overthrow of evil and death, and the fulfillment of the appointed feasts in God's redemptive order. She represents the red heifer pattern, the offering of purification. She represents the daily sacrifice, the continual yielding of the self before God. She is connected to the true temple from above, the living dwelling place where the presence of God is carried, guarded, and revealed in appointed time. But her path was not formed through ease. She allowed the Ruah, Mother Wisdom, to refine her through suffering. She allowed the Spirit to purify her inwardly. She drew closer to the Almighty through surrender, through obedience, through wounds that became places of healing, and through the sacred process of being restored. And this is why her witness matters so deeply, because there are daughters listening today who feel far from God. There are women who feel wounded, imperfect, unworthy, or too broken to be restored. There are souls who think the process has been too long, too painful, or too difficult. But the daughter's path testifies that restoration is possible. Sanctification is possible. Inner healing is possible. A soul can be refined. Life can be gathered back into God. What was wounded can be purified. What was scattered can be reordered. What was distant can be brought near. If we cling to the Creator, if we allow the Spirit to guide our lives, if we surrender to the inward work of healing, the Almighty can make the soul into a dwelling place again. And this is why the Golden Veil is so beautiful. It not only covers glory, it covers the story of restoration. It covers what has been refined, what has been offered, and what has been brought near through obedience. And when the appointed time comes, what God has veiled in holiness will be revealed in glory. In the next teaching, we will move carefully behind the veil and speak of the stillness after arrival, the holy hush of the bride, who is no longer striving to enter because she has entered. And when we speak of this holy hush, it is like the sacred silence we see in heaven before God moves in divine order. When heaven becomes still, it does not mean nothing is happening. It means something holy is being held, guarded, and prepared according to the Almighty's timing. So the golden veil brings us to the threshold, and the next teaching will carry us behind it. Into the stillness, the oil already burning, the heavenly family gathered, and the bride waiting in glory before the appointed wedding. Thank you for studying with me and for walking carefully through this mystery. I will see you in the next video. Thank you, family, for being here. If this teaching helped you, please like, comment, and share. It truly helps this message reach those who are seeking. To our new subscribers, welcome. And if you'd like to go deeper, we invite you to join as a member. The link is in the description and on our homepage. We are praying for you and standing with you in the light of Messiah, He and Messiah, She. If you'd like to support the ministry, you can visit our store or bless our dear brother Michael via the Buy Me a Coffee link in the description below, which also includes a link to our second store with new designs. Thank you for your love and encouragement, and stay tuned for the next video. May the spirit of wisdom and peace rest upon you always.
אני קוראת לה בין סדקי הקיר שומעת צעדייך, לב פועל בכל סמטה שלך, לא אשכח אותך, לא אעזוב ידייך. ירושלים בציון שלך שומרת לך מקום בתוך